Welcome to A Line Through Time, where I take the time to look through your favourite franchises and work out how it all lines up. Mortal Kombat turns 30 today, so to celebrate, I wanted to see how many MK characters I can identify the ages of. First, we need to establish a time frame for the series events. Scorpion says Sub-Zero killed him 2 years prior to MK1 on the way to the island, which is depicted in MK Mythology's Sub-Zero. Bios from the beta version of Special Forces list Sonia's age as the same as in MK1, setting it the same year. MK2 takes place immediately after MK1. Deadly Alliance takes place a decade after MK1. Deception takes place immediately after that. Armageddon is sometime after that. MK9 retells MK1 to 3 in a new timeline. MKX's prologue is 2 years after that, and being the equivalent of MK4, we can assume MK4 is 2 years after MK3. MKX itself is 20 or 25 years after the prologue. We'll say 25. MK11 is 2 years after MKX. The MKX comic, for how it relates to the numerous 5 years ago flashbacks in the game, is estimated to be set 5 years prior to the game. And the last detail is MK11 Johnny Cage telling past Sector to
go back to the 90s,
suggesting that MK1 is set in its year of release, 1992. We have to make assumptions for MK3 and Armageddon. The most we have as evidence is Raiden saying
Earthrealm has enjoyed relative peace for many years.
In Deadly Alliance, pushing MK3 and 4 as far from it as possible. To me, this suggests MK3 is no more than 2 years after MK2. MK9 having all 3 games in one story suggests a shorter span, but MK3 released 2 years after MK2, and Deadly Alliance's timeframe matches up with its release a decade after MK1, as does MKX's MK4 segment coming 2 years after MK9's MK3 segment. But most people wouldn't call 6 years many, so I'll go with this. MK1 released in October 1992, so if we assume it and MK2 are both set in October, MK3 can occur a few months later in 1993. This way, the many years are 7, and combine this with the +2 + 25 + 2, and MK11 is a nice round 30 years after MK1. We have nothing for Armageddon though, unless we follow the Deadly Alliance and MKX logic and have it be set 2 years after Deception. With this, our time frame goes like this: 1990, Mythologies. 1992, Special Forces, MK1, MK2. 1993, MK3. 1995, MK4. 2002, Deadly Alliance, Deception. 2004, Armageddon. 1992 to 1993, MK9. 1995, MKX Prologue. 2015, MKX Comic. 2020, MKX. 2022, MK11. You may disagree with some of my conclusions here, but those specifics aren't necessarily important. It's just to get a general vibe of what age the characters are, at least roughly, when certain major events occur in their lives. And with all that established, we can get to work. The MK1 prequel comic gives us the ages for all of our mortal heroes and Goro. Liu Kang is 24 when he wins the 2 tournaments. This means he was born in 1968 and is 34 at the time of his death in Deadly Alliance. In the second timeline, he wins the tournaments at 24, dies at 25, becomes the ruler of the Netherrealm at 52, and is reborn as a fire god and creates a new timeline at both 24 and 54. Johnny Cage is 29, born in 1963. He dies at 30, returns by 32, dies and comes back again at 39, then dies for good at 41. The second version beats Shinnok and conceives Cassie at 32, mentors the Combat Kids at 57, and loses Sonia at 59. Sonia Blade is 26, born in 1966. She forms the Outer World Investigation Agency at 27, dies briefly at 36, then dies permanently at 38. The second version gets pregnant at 29, presumably gives birth at 30, is a general by 54, and dies at 56. Her past self finally kills Kano at 26. Kano is 35, born in 1957. He saves Khan from Shiva's plot at 36 and dies at 47. The second version dies at 65 when his 35-year-old self is shot by Sonia. Scorpion is 32. It's unclear if this means he died at 32 or that he would be 32 if he hadn't died at 30. Without a specific note, I assume the latter. Born in 1960, Scorpion dies at 30, avenges himself and becomes Quail Liang's protector at 32, learns the truths of his family's deaths at 34, becomes champion of the Elder Gods at 42, and dies for good at 44. The second version avenges himself at 32, is freed from Quan Chi's hold and reforms the Shirai Ryu at around 35, defeats Havoc at 55, kills Quan Chi at 60, and dies for good at 62. Sub-Zero is 32, born in 1960. Bi-Han foils Shinnok's schemes at 30, dies and becomes Noob Saibot at 32, defeats Goro at 42, and dies for good at 44. The second version becomes Noob Saibot at 32, falls into the Soulnado at 33, and returns and loses to Jackie Briggs at 62. We don't know the age difference between Bi-Han and Quail Liang. They look around the same age in their MK9 story vignettes, but that's all we have to go on. Quail Liang is born after 1960, loses his brother at sub 32, flees the Lin Kuei at sub 33, is Grandmaster by sub 42, and dies at sub 44. The second version loses his brother and gets cyberized at sub 32, dies at sub 33, is revived at sub 35, becomes Grandmaster at sub 55, and takes part in the fight against Kronika at sub 62. Goro is 2000. It's just listed as 2000, so if we assume that's actually how old he is specifically, then he was born in 9 BCE. These ages will sound like years, but pay attention because they are not. He became Mortal Kombat champion in 1542 at 458, loses to Liu Kang in 1992 at 2000, makes peace with Kung Lao and joins Katana at 2003, rejoins Shao Kahn at 2010, and dies for real at 2012. The second version loses to Liu Kang at 2000, loses his arms at 2023, and is dead by 2030. Outside of these bios, only occasionally are other characters given something to work with beyond large-scale guesswork. While unused in the final game, Jax's bio in the beta build of Special Forces lists him as 32. He foils Kano's plot and learns about Outworld at 32, begins using cyber sleeves full-time at 33, dies briefly at 42, and dies for good at 44. The second version loses his arms at 32, dies at 33, is restored at around 35, has his daughter at around 36, captures Quan Chi at 60, and joins Kronika for a while at 62. Interestingly, his initial rank of Major is shared by Sonia's father in her comic bio, so I wonder if Jax was supposed to be around his age initially. Takeda Takahashi reunites with Kenshi 5 years before MKX, which he says is 10 years after he was left with Scorpion when he was 8. Thus, Takeda was born in 1997, is left with Scorpion in 2005 at 8 years old, reunites with his dad in 2015 at 18, and gets together with Jackie at 23. Katana is consistently referred to as being 10,000 years old, being born around the time of Edenia's conquest presumably. This number seems way too big to be specific, but with the 50 years between tournaments thing, it could actually be specific. Jade is presumed to be around the same age, with the two being shown as children in one MK11 ending. Molina was originally presumed to be raised alongside Katana, but MK9 changed it to have her be created during MK2. This makes her 1 when Khan dies and she becomes Kanon. She is overthrown at 18 according to the comic and 23 according to the game, and she dies at 28. Shujinko, according to developer diaries and interviews at the time of Deception, is 13 when he meets Damashi. Louis Mangubat described each subsequent form as being him in his 20s, he's explicitly 18 when he finishes his training, 30s and 40s, not specifying his final form's time frame. Ed Boon placed this Shujinko at around 60. It's worth noting here that Shujinko doesn't age entirely naturally. Even putting wonky timeline integration aside, he ages from his second to third form artificially in Chaos Realm, so he's actually around a decade younger than he looks from this point onwards. I swear one of the devs once said the quest lasts 40 years, but I can't find where this was said. If Shujinko is physically around 60, that makes him around 50, so the quest would be around 40 years, so let's go with that. He is born around 1942. He first meets Damashi around 1955 at age 13. His quest begins in earnest around 1960 at age 18. He finishes his quest and kills Onaga in 2002 around age 60. He then dies in 2004 around age 62. The second version becomes possessed by Havoc around age 73 and is never heard from again, unless Cassie Cage really did kill him at age 78. And yeah, I know that this should also mean he's in his 40s when the tournament is about to happen 10 years before he's 60, but I told you the timeline is wonky, so leave it. Some characters don't have anything definitive stated about them, but we can piece together a few things based on their connections with other characters. Shang Tsung lost to the Great Kung Lao 50 years before Goro's 9-win streak started, making that 500 years ago in 1492. He won at least one tournament prior to that, and we can assume he was at least 20 by then, meaning he was born sometime prior to 1422. Jackie Briggs is Cassie's longtime best friend, so they seem to be around the same age. There's obviously a few months between them, given that Sonia was presumably already pregnant with Cassie during her flashback where Jax is restored to human, only meeting Vera while recovering from that, so we can assume there are a few months between them, but probably less than a year. Cassie Cage is conceived soon after Shinnok's defeat in 1995, so we can assume she's born in 1996, along with Jackie. They first enter Outworld and get possessed by blood magic at 19, which tracks since they're under 21, and are part of Johnny's team at 24. Cassie loses her mother at 26, and Jackie has already lost hers by then. Jackie has a storyline of her own at 26, and Cassie becomes a breeding slave at 26 because Jesus Christ MK11, this is not the kind of horny the fans want. The way Kung Jin idolizes Kung Lao always suggested to me that he was old enough to have known him before his death in Outworld, but MK11 suggests Lao didn't know about him until the Time Merger, suggesting he's around Cassie and Jackie's age. Others only have the broadest possible details. Sindel is Kitana's mother, so she's over 10,000 years old, as are Kitana's two fathers, Jared and Shao Kahn. Smoke is presumably around Quail Liang's age, being his best friend. Likewise, Kung Lao is presumably around Liu Kang's age, being his best friend. Lesser gods are presumably younger than elder gods, who are younger than Kronika. And that's everything. Go do something to celebrate MK's birthday, because the people who own it actively refuse to do so. If you liked this video, come on, it's my birthday. Why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, come on, it's my birthday, you still have to. Today's recommended video is one of mine, because today's my birthday too, and unlike MK, I refuse to let one of my birthdays go uncelebrated. The second version dies at 65 when his 35-year-old self is shot by Kano. Shot by Kano, he is Kano.